Hello, today we'll be recapping a 2020 Norwegian movie called Mortal. Beware, spoilers ahead. The film opens and we meet a boy camping named Eric. He has a nightmare and wakes up to see the trees around him on fire. He also finds his legs have been badly burnt. Eric ventures into town and breaks into a local clinic to treat his wounds. On the way back to his campsite, some teens get out of their car and begin to harass him. One boy named Ole pushes him, and Eric says, "If you touch me, you will burn." The boy then grabs him by his collar and instantly collapses to the ground and dies. Eric is later captured by police and a young psychologist named Christine is called in to speak with him. He cowers in a corner but eventually sits with her at a table. She learns he is a Norwegian American and may be the suspect of a fire that killed all his family but him. Christine removes his handcuffs and Eric confirms he killed them and the boy, but he says he didn't mean to. As he talks, Christine's hair begins to stand up and he raises water droplets from a cup. Christine is shocked and Eric says he doesn't know how he does it. He then becomes agitated and the table begins to burn and the room sparks with electricity. Eric says he can't control it and a fire starts in the building. Christine realizes what is happening and tries to calm Eric, telling him his emotions control the powers. He is able to calm down and the electricity stops. The U.S. Embassy then arrives but Eric says he only wants to talk with Christine and no one else. They have no choice though, and the Americans sedate him and load him onto a helicopter to fly to the States. During the flight, the sedatives wear off and Eric begins to panic from being tied down. He begins to thrash around and spark. Then the Americans notice a thunderstorm has suddenly appeared. Lightning strikes the helicopter and they lose power and go crashing into the water below. Eric realizes his powers allow him to breathe underwater and he burns his restraints off. He grabs one American agent named Hathaway and drags her to the shore, then saves her using CPR. Once she is breathing again, Eric sprints away into the woods. Christine hears the news and we also see the father of Ole load his gun and leave his house, presumably to try and kill Eric. Outside, Eric finds Kritzine and the two talk. She decides to take him to her friend's cabin where he will be safe. In the car, she asks Eric how he got these powers but he has no answer. The two eventually arrive at the cabin and Eric smiles and thanks her for the help. He tells her the powers started 3 years ago when he caused the fire that killed his family. In the hospital, Hathaway shows the police photos of the storms and says Eric somehow was able to control the weather. Back at the cabin, Christine realizes she can't do this and tells Eric he needs to turn himself in. He says he understands and when the two hug, the rain stops and the sun shines on the two of them only. This changes Christine's mind and she decides they should go to the farm where his powers first began. The two drive for a while then stop at a gas station. Inside, Christine sees a picture of herself on the news and she is now wanted by police too. Later, Christine almost gets in a car crash and this causes Eric to spark out of fear. The electricity damages the car and makes it unable to drive. Luckily, a trucker arrives behind them and offers them a ride. However, they soon reach a bridge and discover a police roadblock has been set up. The driver runs out of the truck when he realizes he has seen Eric's face on the news. The police approach the vehicle with guns drawn and Eric decides to step out and turn himself in. He holds his hands up and Christine is aggressively taken down by one of the men. This angers Eric, who begins to scream at them saying to let her go. As his rage increases, we see that gray storm clouds are beginning to form above the bridge and the sky darkens. Lightning forms and flows through the cables on the bridge. Eric screams and the two policemen are thrown back and Christine runs to his side. The men then approach again and Eric's hands begin to spark with powerful electricity. Lightning comes down from the clouds and then strikes rapidly around the bridge. A police helicopter loses control and one of the officers is struck. Christine kneels by his side and helps him to calm down and regain control of his emotions. Eric is then able to focus and he creates a wall of lightning separating the two from the police officers. Hathaway and others watch in amazement at what they are seeing. After a minute of this, Eric collapses to the ground and the storm quickly disappears. The police chief named Henrik then drives the two of them to a local hospital. Christine asks why he is helping and he says he is a believer in God and doesn't want to be on the wrong side if this is him. Meanwhile, Hathaway calls her superiors and they decide they need to kill Eric or he could bring devastation to the world. Back in the car, the radio states social media now believes that Eric is the Norse god, Thor. They arrive at the hospital and he passes out. He awakes and prepares to be scanned, and he tells them he was transported to a different world where he saw a big tree. When doctors scan his body, they wonder how he is still alive with his injuries. Eric begins to panic and spark, and the entire hospital loses power. A doctor rushes in and says this caused a boy to go into cardiac arrest. Eric hears this and rushes to the room, but suddenly Ole's father appears and aims his gun at him seeking revenge. Eric apologizes but says he needs to go save another boy who is about to die. The father tears up but finally lowers his gun. Eric enters the boy's room and finds the parents crying and doctors performing chest compressions. They reluctantly let him near the child and he places his hand on his chest. Eric closes his eyes and the boy suddenly snaps awake and doctors discover he is completely healed. When Eric leaves the hospital, he finds a group of people waiting and trying to touch him. The police chief then agrees to take Eric to the farm and says the army is blocking it off for them. On the way, Christine reads about Norwegian gods and says Thor's two sons built a farm many years ago. She believes Eric is from that family and that may be why he gained his powers at the farm. They later arrive and find the military standing guard. The three of them check out the burned-down building and Eric suddenly falls to his knees and can't move. The two move him away, then see a Nordic symbol on the ground. They then bring in excavators to dig in that area. Meanwhile, the Americans arrive and snipers set up with the intention to kill Eric. Hathaway tells them to fire as soon as the situation escalates. After digging, the team finds a hidden cave in the ground. Henrik and Christine enter first and find ancient Norse runestones. Henrik reads some of them and discovers they are written by the god Thor and his sons. They explore more and discover a large tree with 9 worlds like Eric had described. Eric then decides to enter the cave for himself and he is drawn to a box. He opens it and finds Thor's gloves in his belt. Lastly, he discovers Thor's ancient hammer which is named Mjolnir. Eric puts on the gloves and belt, then holds the hammer and it begins to spark with power. Thunder comes down and strikes it and it begins to glow with electricity. When Eric comes back up, he holds it into the sky and the snipers report this to Hathaway. Hathaway hears this and orders them to take him out. However, Christine walks towards him and she is struck in the head by the misfired bullet. Eric screams and tries to heal her, but her injury is too severe so it is no use. He screams in rage and thunder is heard. Then he summons the hammer which flies into his hand. Snipers shoot at him but the bullets are stopped in midair and Eric throws the hammer into the sky. Henrik tries to stop him but he unleashes the deadly power and people are struck down by lightning bolts as they try to flee. We then flash forward and hear the voice of a news reporter who says the number of casualties is still unknown and all of Norway is in shock. Finally, he states Eric is considered a terrorist and is nowhere to be found.